Lev, welcome. Good to see you. How are you, brother?
I'm good. Good to see you too. Looking great.
Yeah,
likewise. Working well for you.
Yeah, are you doing your own haircuts? Because I just did mine. It's been my third solo haircut run during this quarantine time.
I tried. It was not very successful. I mean, I did some trimming, and it was kind of not a successful job. I guess I'll have to wait a few more weeks before everything opens up in New York City.
Yeah. How are things there in New York City?
It's not bad, actually. I mean, the city looks, obviously, I mean, it's not only coronavirus, right? The kind of, sorry.
So, Lev, can you tell us up front a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're working on now?
Sure, yeah. So basically, my background is about 25 years in fintech, working for major financial institutions, building trading platforms, supporting trading platforms, and doing risk management. Also worked for a few years for private equity in the technology space. Right now, we're working on analytics platform to analyze blockchains. It's GoCipher. The product is live. We're talking to a number of clients. In terms of monetization and how to bring it to enterprises. Basically, it's kind of enterprise strength platforms coming from traditional or legacy finances into new world of blockchains, or bridging, I would say, the old legacy world with the new world. So that's basically the main focus: analytics for blockchains and how to prepare the corporations to work with securitized tokens, securitized digital instruments.
And what initially got you interested in blockchain work and cryptocurrencies and things of that nature?
Well, it was fascinating. First part was actually fascination with the technological solution, and primarily with Bitcoin, the way how it works, how it solves some existing mathematical problems. And there was basically curiosity. And slowly as I got involved, I spoke to my partner. We discussed what can we do for the space. We started doing some mining, some trading, and then slowly decided that we should bring our expertise in analytics into the upcoming world of digital currencies and digital financial instruments. Our initial projections were slightly more optimistic. We started the product about 2.5 years ago. We thought that within 2 years it would be more kind of adapted within corporations, and more things are going to be happening, and Ethereum will be playing more dominating role. And what we've been seeing in the past year, that despite a lot of investments, a lot of work with ICOs, and a lot of new products coming online, the volumes are not that high. And we also see that the technology is not robust enough. It's not as stable as we want it to be, or as we expected it would be. So it's always innovation of such scale takes much longer than initially anticipated. But we're very optimistic. We think at some point it's going to be reaching critical mass. We're also very optimistic about Facebook. We think these guys have obviously expertise in building huge systems, making them available, and very impressed that during this pandemic, where so many people rely on Facebook for communication, for kind of keeping in touch with each other when everybody's on lockup, the systems are so available and perform fantastically well. I mean, the streaming, and I mean, like in the past 3 months, I haven't experienced a single day when Facebook wouldn't be available, and I haven't heard from anybody that Facebook didn't deliver or was too slow. I'm very impressed. So I'm still a believer that they're gonna go through with the securities. They're gonna go with Libra. I follow them and I see the kind of I don't think it's a technical issue. It's more regulatory issue. And as they resolve the regulatory issues, and I think they will, it's going to be like amazing push for the whole industry. I mean, I can see how one day it's just 2 billion people suddenly will have in their application just one extra like, icon, which will connect to the wallet. And then next thing you know, 2 billion people have access to cryptocurrency. And 150 million businesses on Facebook, they'll have access to cryptocurrency. So suddenly there's 2 billion people in this space. And even if they don't know what cryptocurrency is, they'll start kind of playing with it. And then Facebook, I'm sure Facebook will be able to properly find a way how to monetize it and how to ignite the whole ecosystem. So I'm extremely like a big believer that will be a major turning point for crypto adaptation.
And what are you seeing in taking a step back? There's a lot of confusion in the world right now. I think a lot of people are confused about how this market is currently at $320 a SPY right now. Tesla's at $1,020. This macro environment is confusing for people, seeing as that jobless rates are at all-time highs since Great Depression, and unemployment levels, and the money printing that's going on, concerns about inflation. I remember you and I, when we were driving up to a ski resort in upstate New York, talking about the Fourth Turning book and seasonality and what's going to happen and to what's going to be the catalyst. What are your thoughts on the macro environment right now, where we are and where we're going?
I mean, to be honest with you, it's a bit scary. Despite the fact that the market is going up, I'm on sidelines. A lot of people I talk to, a lot of traders, obviously taking advantage of the situation, but at the same time, the very experienced people are very cautious, and I see that a lot of professionals minimizing, trimming their positions. The more investing, the more moving into bonds. They're not as aggressive, and I think I could be wrong, but that's a lot of retail investors and a lot of gamblers who now cannot. Bettors who usually bet on sports, they're sitting at home and they're used to betting, and I'm not sure if it's an addiction. For some it's addiction, for some it's entertainment. And as they sit at home, they suddenly find that, oh, there's another place where they can easily kind of bet. And it's, I've seen some very irrational moves in companies which are going into bankruptcy. Just the stock is skyrocketing. It makes me feel uncomfortable in terms of basically doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just doesn't make sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to me, it makes me, as anybody else, makes me uncomfortable. And if it makes me uncomfortable, I'm staying on the sidelines as I don't understand what's really going on. Possible I'm missing the biggest bull market in the history. Maybe it's going to be roaring 20s. Maybe it's coming back. The innovation is ignited. But from my fundamental perspective, I see 40 million people unemployed. I think there are ripple effects. It's got to be some, the real economy is not going to be doing as well as people expect when the market opens up. I'm kind of uneasy, and then it's election year, but it seems to be like no bad. Like right now, I feel it's like the liquidity is provided by federal bank, and that's the market reacts to liquidity. But if insolvency starts happening, as I expect, and the more downsizing is going to be happening, it's deflationary force. People start making less money, and then after opening, as we don't see we're going back to kind of February 2020, the mood might change. Right now, psychology is very, despite everything that's going on, the psychology of investors is very optimistic. I think that the president, with his reminders that the economy is doing well, is somehow helping it, kind of elevating overall the mood and expectations, but then the time will show. And then I don't know what's going to happen with the second wave. For me, it's still in the play. The virus is not over. The pandemic is not over.
And now we just had a ton of people marching all over the world in close proximity with each other, potentially really spreading this virus to an unprecedented level. We don't know that yet. But when I saw those crowds of people not wearing masks, I kept thinking to myself, this is concerning.
It is, yeah. And so what we did during the pandemic, we used our analytics platform to pump in publicly available information on COVID-19, and now we're starting running predictive algos. So as of now, we didn't make the results of predictive algos public yet. We're still tuning them up. We're looking at the data, and we see some spikes of data indexes. We see some spikes of data, like Florida is overall doing pretty well. I mean, considering the population and the overall number of cases, but it's still kind of climbing up. And usually respiratory diseases slow down during the summer. So I don't know, like basically for me, it's still a big question what's going to happen when the country opens up and then when September comes, and how it's going to impact the market, how it's going to impact the real economy, not just the stock market, but the businesses. And like entertainment industry, I don't know what's, I don't know when, like for example, Broadway, I don't know when Broadway is going to open up, right? Will people go? How they're going to open up? How they're going to figure out the seating? Or restaurants. A friend of mine represents, he's a lawyer, he represents a number of restaurants. And as most of you might know, that restaurants in general run on low margins. So for them, decreasing capacity, going from 100% to let's say 75, basically entirely kills the business. And so it's like a lot of questions. And it's great that the market is optimistic and hopefully it's looking forward. And it's just not, it's not a bull trap.
Well, it seems to me, what I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed the same, but a lot of young people are starting to talk about trading, investing, and, jumping on apps like Robinhood and, seeing if they could, they're getting a little bit of momentum, right? Because they've jumped in maybe a good time in the market, made a little money, but it's almost reminds me a little bit of in the 1920s when everyone started speculating, right? Which is concerning because if this is a bull trap, which I personally think it may be, what's going to happen when it starts heading down again? Are there going to be a lot of either A, bag holders, or B, people that are hurt, even more than they were?
Well, if you follow if you look at the previous bear markets, it's a very standard pattern that first there is a kind of retrenchment of the bull market comes back, and then not the bull market, but the rally comes back, and then when the next leg, when it goes down, it goes much faster and more brutal. Also, yes, I see a lot of volume in Robinhood trading, and when I go to Robinhood to check the charts, realize that some of the people they're not very experienced. It's hard for me to kind of gauge. We didn't do any analysis in terms of understanding the level of expertise of the traders in Robinhood, but I suspect that a lot of them not extremely experienced, and they right now they probably made very substantial amount of money, especially if they got in March or late March, early April on the bottom, but they don't know how to manage the risk. They don't know how to properly position themselves. They get also involved in the more complex instruments, not just equity. They trade with options, and when the market changes direction, and if it happens fast, it might be not very attractive. And another one is it's election year. It's another kind of, I think that's another level of complication. Let's put it that way. In my mind, I'm not sure who's going to win, who's going to lose. I cannot predict what's going to happen, but I feel that if the election is very close, if we have similar outcome as we had in 2000, and in 2000, just if you remember, it was between Bush and Gore. The election came very close and took about 3 to 4, like I think it's 3 months, right, to get resolved. But that was like we're talking about very nice times. I mean, everything was great. The economy was doing great. It was very high employment. The population was very optimistic. There were no riots.
There wasn't the populism and the nationalism and the authoritarianism and the divisiveness that there is now. It was a more civilized era.
It was more civilized, and regardless of who you like more, like all things considered, I thought that candidates were in some way, were more similar than different. I mean, Al Gore and George Bush were kind of, I mean, there were differences, but they were not drastic differences. And there was, I think most of the people were kind of okay with both of them. They had preference for one of them, but the second one was not that, it was not end of the world. But the sentiment now, and we're still in June, it feels like that the opposite side will be very, very unhappy of whoever wins the election. And that might be such level of uncertainty might create extra problems for the market. Again,
Well,
in my opinion.
When you, the way that I kind of see it is almost like you have an old barn with, you know, it's all dried up wood and hay and, you know, some old gas canisters, and all it takes is one spark. You know, we look at what happened with George Floyd, but when you look at that in the context of the unemployment, the current economic situation, I mean, when people don't have jobs and they are living hand to mouth and they don't have savings, and then something happens to trigger that anger, and they have someone to focus that anger toward, it becomes incredibly disruptive.
Well, I also look at this from a slightly, like another perspective, is that when humans are in stress, our frontal lobe, our areas which are responsible for decision making and for logical thinking, getting suppressed. So in that condition, it's kind of our reptilian brain kind of takes over. So in the states of stress, and I'm talking about like the stress, right now we have multiple factors. We have pandemic, it's still in the play. I mean, for some reason, people are not as concerned as only 3 weeks ago, but I think it's due to the media. But still, there was, for a long time, people were on the different levels. Some were less, some were more, but it was constant it was creating stress regardless of whether you believed in how deadly the virus was or not. That was stress. Unemployment is not a level of stress. Election. So there is a whole compounding effect of different stress factors, and that suppresses our logical thinking. And again, it varies on an individual level, depends on the person, but overall, for masses, it kind of, a majority of people, it suppresses the logical decision. And in a state like that, as you probably said, it's like a small thing can ignite the whole fire, because suddenly, as people start thinking logically and go through the details, even with Floyd, I mean, that I think it was the step basically from video to actions. There was no even discussion. I mean, it was so fast. It was so fast. It spread so fast. It's unbelievable. And it got to the point of not just protests, it got to the point of riots. And so it got pretty fast, got out of control. And basically, then the next one is what's going to happen as we get closer and closer to elections.
Yeah.
How the public is going to react to winning or losing of their candidate. Will they accept the results of election? Will they accept that the results are honest? You add to that factor potential second wave in September, plus September will have the seasonal flu. So if you combine there's every year, what about like 20-30% of the population gets flu, right? I think that's the number.
Mm-hmm.
Like under standard conditions, people would probably ignore, like majority of the people who get flu, they stay home 1 or 2 days, they take medication, they take vitamins, and then maybe they skip 1 or 2 days of work, but it's usually not a stressful event. During the pandemic, a lot of people will start thinking that, they'll it just be the level of paranoia is going to escalate, because you would ask yourself, what if I have a virus? So people will start going to medical offices. Some would be afraid to go to medical offices because they would think that that's where they're really going to get sick. So it will add extra level of uncertainty, discomfort, and stress. And again, we're going back to the same kind of igniting of a small sparkle, igniting a small sparkle, that the small additional stress factor can make people edgier and less logical and more kind of conducive to aggressive or active aggressive action.
So, for the listeners out there, how are you positioning yourself right now to protect, preserve, and grow your wealth during a time like this? I'm very bullish on gold and silver. I'm accumulating my position in gold and silver. This is kind of strange. There's a combination of I'm kind of worried, but at the same time I'm excited, because I think, mentioning back your fourth turning book, I believe that ahead of us is maybe complicated but very exciting time. The time when millennials and the new generation will take over the country. Through elections. It's maybe not this election cycle, but the next. And there's a lot of things will have to be remodeled, rebuilt. Like even if you look at New York City, it's a great city. I love New York. I moved here 25 years ago. There were a few times when I thought I would leave. I was thinking about moving to London. At some point I was thinking about moving to Moscow. But when it came close to that, I would find the reason not to. And it's a fantastic city, and there's a lot of great things about New York. And I still think it's a strong city and will re-engineer itself and come back stronger. But the city was designed and built in 20th of last century by people who are not already around. These people are dead. So the architecture, the design of the city was done, the whole concepts, the way how it operates, how people commute, how people live, how people work, it was all made a lot of sense and worked great in the 20th of last century. So now I think the big, huge task of rethink what it means for 21st century, for today's reality, how the corporate office is going to work. Do we need to warehouse? I think it was the CEO of Barclays who said we don't need to warehouse employees, 20,000 employees in one space. Do we need large offices? Do we need small offices? It's better to have a community life. Supply chains. There's a lot of things that are going to be rethought, redesigned. I don't know how they're going to look like. But they'll have to be addressed. We saw the healthcare didn't. They actually performed not as bad, but there was some issues with the supply lines. The companies are not getting enough PPEs, or there's tons of issues kind of surfaced, and they'll have to be addressed. And a lot of this will have to be addressed with technology. As we in fintech will think that the financial industry will have to be remodeled, readjusted. As I said, we have the product. We're very bullish, despite the fact that the kind of short term, there's so much uncertainty that I wouldn't say bearish, we're cautious. We're cautious because maybe even on an emotional level, when there are riots on the street, you naturally get a bit scared. I'm just a human. I walk outside, there are people rioting, throwing rocks. It's an unpleasant environment. But on the long run, we're very bullish. We think that we'll overcome this, and then it will be just a lot of
maybe hard work, but interesting at the same time. Rethinking and rethinking everything. It's like rebuilding systems of systems, like just everything. Nothing is for granted. Education has to change. Healthcare has to change. Supply lines have to change. Localization has to change. Obviously, there is now a huge push for changing of police. I'm not for getting rid of police, but maybe it has to be rethought. Maybe there's a lot of work the police shouldn't be doing. Maybe they shouldn't be talking to homeless people who probably have mental problems. They don't need to be policed. They have to be helped. Or it has to be somehow addressed. I'm not an expert, but it has to be some kind of addressed. Then the government maybe has to be refactored, or public transportation. Like, I mean, it's like if you look at the subway system in New York City, it's overcrowded. I mean, New York City haven't had a single new bridge built in the past 50, 60 years. Not a tunnel. The infrastructure is crumbling. Should be rebuilt, but if it's rebuilt, should be brought back to what it used to be, or something new has to come up.
Or maybe new communities altogether will be built, because with the advent of using things like drone technology, we'll be able to do more remote.
Absolutely.
But getting back to for portfolio allocation.
So I'm gold. I'm primarily I have like most of basically right now I'm split. I'm between gold, silver. I have some bitcoins. I'm despite the fact that I'm in crypto space. I really am not sure, but I'm bullish on crypto as the new rails for technology, but I don't have very strong opinion about gold, not gold, about Bitcoin. I'm not in the camp of, I'm not in the zero camp, but I'm not in $100,000 camp. So I'm looking at technical analysis, looking at with a business partner. If it goes above 10.5, we'll probably buy more. But right now it's in the channel. So we're trying to be pragmatic about it.
Well, my concern is that when we saw this initial drop, what we had thought was that Bitcoin was the uncorrelated asset class. But during that drop, what was it in May or March? Bitcoin went down, gold went down, everything went down because people were just running for liquidity. And my current concern is that if this is just the beginning of a bear market like the 1920s when we saw 89% down from the highs, what do we have that's proven to us that, Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in general are not going to follow suit, even gold?
Absolutely.
If people need money, they're going to liquidate anything that's worth money, especially things that are maintaining their value.
Well, that's usually how most of the bear markets. First, you have all asset classes correlated, because as you pointed out, everybody runs for liquidity. But then certain asset classes become decoupled. It's interesting. Even when the gold went down in price, if you look for physical, you couldn't easily get physical. So there was disconnect between paper pricing and physical. Then silver was very interesting. If you want to get silver coins, the premium for coins was so high that basically in the real for physical silver, it was not a very big dip. Then so gold has 5,000 years of proven history. I mean, gold went through a lot. I understand that we live in 21st century, but it's a kind of good track record in my opinion. Bitcoin, it's very fresh. It's very new. It's still not kind of. It was not battle proof, and I'm not as I'm not as pessimistic as Professor Rubini, for example, who says it's a total fraud and it should go to zero. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I can see I understand his logic. I hear where he's coming from. But I don't think it's going to go to 100. But basically, I agree with your point that there's no reference point. It was created after loss. It was created as a hedge against what we're seeing right now. And you would have expected that when the government prints trillions of dollars over a month, that Bitcoin, it should be reflected in Bitcoin, that it should skyrocket and it should like surpass all other asset classes and provide not only safe haven, but just amazing hedge. And then you see with everything going on, with riots, with Hong Kong, it's a fantastic, it's a basically use case Bitcoin was built for. And it's so far, it's not reflected in Bitcoin. Bitcoin, there's a lot of professionals who just use it as a fantastic speculative vehicle, but I don't see that adaptation is going like any faster than it was always. I don't see basically use case for Bitcoin is not as strong as I would have expected, considering the current environment and what's going on in the world.
So one more question. So what is a belief that you have currently that other people around you or people that you know may find a bit controversial?
There are a few. I'm afraid not all of them are politically correct, but let me find something which is not too controversial.
But the whole point is that others would find controversial beliefs that you have that.
Well, okay, there may be a controversial, but maybe not. Well, let's stay within the more politically correct.
Oh, come on, Lev.
No, you don't have to.
No, we're open here. We talk honestly.
Okay. Well, there are a few things. I'll start from first. I believe that so the factor which is very interesting for me is what Marshall McLuhan called his main premise, that the medium is the message. So Marshall McLuhan was saying that we're moving from visual space, we're moving into the audio space, meaning that we're moving in the world where everything is happening simultaneously, not linear. And so media is, it's not even the content of media, but the way how the media works impacts the way how humans interact between each other. And what I feel is that right now, even these riots and everything else, it's a kind of, I would say, it's a result. It's not a result of what really happened. It's a result of media and media with algos operating in conjunction and just bringing the temperature of the mental state of population up and down. And it's almost, we see multiple algos fighting for our emotional state. So the content and the way how police reacted in Minneapolis is not as instrumental at what we see than the way how the media is distributed and how it impacts our psyche. So basically, I'm not saying that there was that the officer didn't kill. I mean, I saw the videos. I understand what happened, but it happens quite often, unfortunately, and it could happen with the African American, or it could happen to white person as well. But the algos pushing through, it's almost, the question is like whether this algos, it's called like egregor. Is it collective subconsciousness empowered by algos pushing through a certain narrative, or it's manufactured by certain political interests. Regardless of that, it's insane instrument. It's like almost like nuclear power, but mental nuclear power. They managed to get hold of media which can, regardless of the message, elevate our emotions or calm us down. The way how 2 weeks ago everybody was talking about coronavirus, and then almost like the channel switched. We forgot about coronavirus. I mean, the 2 weeks ago, you couldn't go to a funeral and congregate more than 50 people. You couldn't go to a church. You couldn't go to synagogue. You couldn't practice your religious beliefs. And then 2 weeks later, it almost like the channel is switched. We forgot about it, and now it's all about racism, inequality. I wouldn't be surprised if a month from now there's another algo with the media, conjunction with media, starts a new meme and will be concerned with totally different topic. And or if it's a marketing meme, then we'll be running and buying something and we'll forget about what happened. So that's kind of one of the conversations when I have with people, they tend not to agree with my point.
And what, if you were to give advice to either yourself as a younger person or a young person today, what do you think the best piece of advice that you could give somebody living through what we're living through now, whether it be your young self or someone today?
I think the times like this, you have to rely more on intuition. It's a time when you have to listen to kind of, I'll say you have mind and you have heart. I'm very analytical, I'm very logical, and that's been because my past experiences working, being in math field. I think right now it's more important to be more intuitive and rely more on intuition. There is no right, there is no wrong. Just you have to build up kind of heart.
All right. And do you have any other messages that you'd give to yourself if you can go back in time, maybe 10, 20 years, and anything that you would change or tell yourself?
I think that would have been the stronger message. That just that was the strongest message. Like build your intuition, trust your intuition, and follow in a lot of decisions. Don't rely as much. Like find the balance between analytics and heart, and it should be 50-50. For myself, it was like 90-10. I would primarily go with logic and trying to make logical, justified decision. And I think maybe before this, it was not as obvious, but now I can see how, because like the models we see, like all these models, they've been for virus, everything else, they might be faulty. And in the time of uncertainty, intuition plays bigger role. And if you if you go with the intuition and then on top of that build some analytical skills, you'll be unstoppable.
It's good advice, brother. Well, thanks for coming on today. It was a great conversation. I look forward to seeing you again next time I come to New York.
Absolutely, John. Absolutely. And I'll see you in Miami.
Let's do it. Take care.